we're back. We'll pretend that I clicked record because this time I didn't have to, but the time before it was a bit too much of a challenge for me. So, what are we going to do for this episode? So, we talked about getting off the plateau. We're getting towards the end of this developer journey, as we call it. And now we're up to another topic. What do we want to go? Now, the last one actually worked out really good. I think the whole getting into a little bit of certifications as a educational tool was really good. Code reviews and testing we've talked about many times.
Have we touched on, so that was really good. We touched on a lot of good topics with that. Would it be advisable to talk, because we've thrown out, you should have your GitHubs, you should have your kitchen sink apps and things like that to kind of showcase your work. Should we maybe get into, all right, so now you are at this point in your development journey. What are some things you can do within your current flow, or again, like last episode, to excel and to continue to grow, to take what you've been doing and build those libraries, to build that portfolio in GitHub or wherever? Because we've kind of talked about doing it, but I don't think we've really walked through the mindset of how to think about going about doing it. Like, when is what I'm doing something that is important enough to put out there in that tool suite?
I like that.
You'll probably find a better way to word that, but
I'm trying to think of that because it just, as you're going through that, it triggered another idea. And I'm trying to decide if it's two separate. It triggered an idea of passing that information on. So it is, what do you do? Like, okay, some stuff. How do you grow other developers, basically? Is it sort of like getting to that point is now you've gotten to a certain point in your career? It is passing that on. It is training other people, whether it is things like documenting your own code and making sure that it is very useful, which we've talked about to others, and how you position some of that. But I think it was a little more of which gets a little bit into that idea of how do you, as part of, and it goes into that training side that we talked about actually in the prior episode. How do we get off of that and say, okay, we know some stuff. I think about it, it's actually stuff we've probably covered in that. So let's punt on that. Let's swing back around to the repository thing, or the kitchen sink, or
building your utilities, building your libraries.
sort of building your own personal toolkit and repository, things like that. It's like adding arrows to your quiver. We'll start with that very generic, weird sort of sprawling kind of topic, and let's see what happens, because I think we can find a way to bring it home. Hello and welcome back. We are continuing our season of growing better developers. We're on the developer journey. We started way back at Hobbiton or whatever it is, and we're on our way to Smog's Lair. It's been a while since I read that, so if I got it wrong, I think it was the Shire is where they started, but that's okay. Nevertheless, trying not to geek out too much. I am Rob Broadhead. I am one of the founders, sadly so, one of the founders of Developreneur, Building Better Developers, also a founder of RB Consulting, where we help you wrangle those dragons of technology, and we help you through integration, simplification, and automation, find ways to actually focus that energy, to take all of that stuff out there, all of the time, the effort, the data entry, and all the stuff that goes into using technology and leveraging it for your business, and find a way to streamline that stuff and give you a better return on investment for the time and the money that you put into your tools. I'll go ahead and do the good thing, bad thing. I'm going to go with the really simple bad thing and this is maybe a little bit of a cautionary tale. Right before I was doing all of this, I was all lined up. I was going to do this little demo for a customer. I'm going to record all this stuff and be like, you do step A, step B, step C, boom, 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 boom. When I got to step 2, and I was like, I should probably cut it off here, but I was like, no, I'm going to go a little bit further. And I went a little bit further, and bam, right into a bug. There was something that was something wrong. Something was and turned out to be something very simple that I did, but nevertheless, be careful with those kinds of things. It's better to do stuff in a bite-sized chunk. Good stuff. Oh, this one may be near and dear to your heart. We have had a customer, a project that we've been working on, and one of the things we need to do is deal with Facebook, Meta. It's API integration stuff with the Facebook Meta place. We aren't doing anything crazy. It's not a Facebook application. It's not really anything other than we just want to use the API to access publicly available data. We're not trying to get something off of a user or anything. Should be super simple. We have spent 3 weeks, I think, now trying to work through the whole approval process to make sure that we cross our T's right, dot our I's properly, and label and categorize our applications so that they actually understand what we're doing and say, oh yeah, go for it, and approved us. And we finally got approval after all of these like headaches, and they would send us stuff that was totally useless information to say, here's how you could approve it. You could, submit it better. And it had nothing to do with our application. So their process, very painful. We got through it. Big V, big victory. More of a victory is you now get to listen to Michael and his good and bad thing and his introduction of himself. Go for it.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Malash. I'm one of the co-founders of Developreneur, Building Better Developers. I'm also the founder of Envision QA. We're a new rebranded company from Malash Consulting. We help small to mid-sized businesses and clinicians build software tailored to you, what your business needs are. Instead of you buying all these cookie cutter software packages that are out there that may give you part of what you need, maybe not, and you have to build all these manual processes, we eliminate that. We help you automate your processes. Good and bad for the week. The good, I have taken a step back. I'm finally taking a vacation and getting some nice R&R, thankfully. And the weather decided to participate. So we're finally not as hot as we have been. The bad side, wife just found out she has to go travel for 2 weeks. So I will be a bachelor for 2 weeks with a bunch of animals to deal with and kids. And it's going to be a scheduling nightmare. But hey, if I follow our own practices, I should be fine.
There you go. This episode, we're going to talk about, basically we've talked about like having your own personal repositories or having like your quiver of arrows, and how do you get technology in there? How do you grow? How do you become a better developer? How do you build these skills? Well, one of the things is now, instead of just, what I'm talking about this episode is not just general skills like, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to learn to program code in C or COBOL or Java or Ruby or blah, 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 whatever the language is. It's really about, which goes back to, it's about problem solving. It's about having tools and utilities and ways for us to more quickly get the job done. Now, one of the most, I think, like complete ways to help yourself learn something better, to learn some really cool problem solving, to improve your general ability to get stuff done and productivity levels, is actually code generators. Anything you can do that is either using a template of some sort and then just using that to just like bam, 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 crank out the tasks that we do every day, which is, you will see these in a lot of IDEs. They'll have their little like source generate, and it'll do things like get all my getters and setters, or just throw, template comments everywhere so that I've got boilerplate for my classes, or adjusting like parameters and some things like that are just very common tasks that you go through. The AI tools that are out there now, you'll see that where it's like, it knows, because we do this a billion times, it knows that you're about to create a class and then walk through all of the properties of the class and assign a value out of that, or copy it from another one or whatever it is. And you'll see AI will just be like, bam, you've got all your code, and you'll have to double check it because it will guess some of your properties wrong. But generally speaking, those kinds of things, those repetitive things that we have, are excellent candidates for us to learn how to use a tool better, but also to scratch our own itch, to make sure that the next time we do task X, we're going to be able to do it faster. These are the utilities that are very helpful for us to have for our own purposes. Also to use if you want to have for example, like a GitHub public repository that you can show off your skills. Those are great tools to throw out there. Now, if you're building, something that's like super secret, that's like really awesome, you don't want to do that, because you don't want to, you don't want to release all that. You want to go make your commercial product and do your side hustle. But if it's especially a little tool utility kind of thing that's a common task. Simple stuff like the things that I remember when I started out, it was things like just finding files within a bunch of directories or finding files of a certain size, or like one I had is it was literally just a little tool that allowed me to spin through a huge text file and do some very simple manipulation. Things like I wanted to take this is back in the day when space was a bigger issue. I wanted to take like a 2 gig file and just go through and wipe out every third row from this big nasty CSV so I could get it to something that was more manageable. Or things that you can do, like there are tools out there, and some of you that are yelling, Unix does all of that. Okay, fine. Yeah, I get that. It does to some extent. But maybe instead of yes, you can do that, you've got like a little shell script that goes and does the awk or the sed stuff that you would normally do to do all of that processing. Also, you can do this in things like Java or Python or C, or pick your language of choice. And it's a way for you to play around with that language to show off your skills. It's going to be a small, bite-sized kind of thing, which makes it really easy to like knock it out of the park. Have really good comments, be really intentional about how you name your variables and how you comment along the way and how you package it. And maybe if you have a README or things like that, all of that stuff is a great start for your personal repository, or your, as Michael likes to talk about, your kitchen sink app, where it's just like, these are the things, these are the tasks that I'm going to do or that I run into on a regular basis. And so I want to be able to have a quick way to get that done. And this is actually even useful, I've found, if you jump languages. So if you have like, let's say, a series of things that you did in Java that are all these like basically code snippets that are, this is how I solve this problem. This is how I solve that problem. Here's an example of me doing this. And maybe you can run it in Java and you can do it in a small way, but also maybe you use that as a template. So now I'm going to go to C#. Well, it's like, well, all right, I'm going to just pick up that Java code, drop it in a C# app. It's not going to compile, but I can look at that and it basically now gives me, my step-by-step approach. Okay, this doesn't work. How do I do this in C#, which becomes an easy thing to throw out into a search engine. I'll go look it up in a reference, however it is, so that you can then translate into whatever that, that language is. Or you may even be able to just look at existing examples and walk through the code and go, oh, this is how we do it in this language. And the next thing you know, you've been able to, quickly do maybe some very complex problem solving in that new language or that new environment. Thoughts on that, Mike?
Boy, you brought back some memories. I know I talk about kitchen sink apps a lot, and like the utilities, especially if you're in Java, you got Maven, you've got all these third-party tools out there, and Apache Commons and things for that for a lot of utility classes, like how you manipulate strings, for example. A lot of this, to me, I kind of went through this process years ago. Back in the 90s, when the web first got popular, we had to start learning HTML. Back then, the internet was still in its infancy, and you couldn't really, Google wasn't a thing. You really didn't have something that you could go look up all these tools. So way back when I was learning HTML, I actually wrote something very similar to what is W3C Schools today, which is a website of nothing but examples for like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And typically today, I call that a kitchen sink, because as you're building these code libraries, as you're writing things, as you're learning things, you're going to write specific functionality that is going to be very powerful to you to be reused in other applications. For example, in one project, you might actually have to encrypt customer data. So now you have to write an encryption tool. Well, that encryption tool, if you follow best practices, is probably going to be an encryption tool that can be reused again and again and again. Other things like string manipulations. Now, again, I mentioned, if you're using Java, you probably should be using the Apache Common libraries for this, but you could write your own string utility class to determine how do you lowercase, uppercase, how you strip out special characters. But the other thing is, this utility class could be a specific functionality. It could be, hey, this is how we handle strings for banks. This is how we handle strings for like EBCDIC, or this is how we handle strings for ASCII. So you could actually build these utility classes for specific functions not only is that good for a kitchen sink app, but this could also be your own way of tapping into the Apache orgs library or other utility libraries that are open source and shared by the community. So you can also get your name out there in the industry. Some other things I've run into, like Rob mentioned, the boilerplate code. I talk about test automation all the time. One of the biggest annoyances is a lot of the frameworks that are out there for building testing require a ton of boilerplate. And if you do the boilerplate, or if you follow it correctly, you're essentially duplicating code for every single test that you do within your application. Well, one of your kitchen sink apps could be, how do I generate that test and build a framework for doing this within a specific, like Selenium or TestNG or Cucumber. That way, you go into the next project, you push a button, boom, there's all your test cases. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And finally, the other thing I really love about this idea is with containers. So now we live in a world where we have cloud-based, we have containers, we have Docker, we have Kubernetes. So now you can actually build a kitchen sink app that can be deployed for anyone and can be expanded, reused. So you could build a mail server using SendGrid, compose it, build it, drop it in your kitchen sink. Now, you don't need to put customer proprietary information in that, but you now have this little kitchen sink utility that, oh, I need a SendGrid app. Click, boom. I now have a fully functional environment to test with or to configure for sending email to a specific client or customer. So there are other ways you can do this within your kitchen sink app to not just build utilities, not just, navigate the boilerplate code, but you could actually build your own custom utilities. You can contribute to the open source industry, the open source communities. You could create something innovative and kind of give it your freeware. Hey, here's an introduction to this, check it out, and then maybe bring them to your site to sell them the actual software. And finally, build custom environments. So you can go from one environment to the other by a push of a button. You build these configurations out there, you reuse them, and then you just tweak them as you need them. So it's a lot about automation. I know we talk about AI a lot because AI is getting popular. But the thing is, AI is not quite there yet. I still test it every now and then and say, hey, build me X, and I'll get something close. But 9 out of 10 times, I have a utility or I have a kitchen sink app that does it better. So while you may rely on AI to get started, as you get better, as you're building your skills, look at best practices. AI isn't always there yet, but it's a tool. Use all the tools in your toolbox to make sure that you're moving forward, you're getting better, and you're always pushing the envelope, always trying to find that next best thing so that you're not getting stale and you're always learning. You're always looking for that next thing. Rob?
You touched on something that we haven't really gotten too much into, but I think is really useful, particularly in the container world. And it's something I've actually gotten so I do more often. Now, granted, I've done it a lot of times by just having like an AWS, EC2 server up and I have it set up, but it's configuration. In particular, common configuration things. For example, most of us probably at some point have had to use Apache and configured a virtual host. Most of us at some point have probably configured Apache with a virtual host and had a typo in there or something that wasn't the right, we had like some of those uppercase instead of lowercase, something like that. Just those ridiculously annoying little configuration problems that can cost us days and create incredible headaches. It is really useful to have as part of our kitchen sink app, something that runs like a complete, soup to nuts things that runs, particularly in a container, because then we can do stuff like say, okay, I'm going to take that thing and I'm going to see what happens if I, like, for example, bump it up to the new version of PHP or Python or whatever it happens to be, or Apache or the operating system or the database. where am I going to hit problems with that? Or potentially it's like, where is it? My problems are just, I didn't type the configuration string properly, or I didn't get that key right, or something like that, versus this is actually something where it's like, it's a code issue. It's those kinds of things. I've had a lot of those. It's amazing how often I will get into it and I will have multiple servers. This is even as part of development where I'll have multiple servers available and I'll go hit it with a database and then I'll go post it, have a different database or a slightly different snapshot of data, like the data that works over here. And now when you do it over here, it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, it seems like it should work. And then if you just copy the data over, you realize that, oh, it's only data. That's a different thing. It's one of those other things we could talk about is like, it's isolating the problem. And if you have a stable, static environment of stuff, or your utilities, whatever they happen to be, your tools, it allows you to have something that gives you like a foundation to work off. Things like string manipulation or searches within strings, particularly if you get into the world of like regular expressions, regexes, and stuff like that, they can be really annoying, basically. Now, some people are, regex masters and you've got all this stuff, but for most of us, you use it here and there, but you don't use it enough that you really have maybe some of the ins and outs of things like how do you find an email string, somebody or a phone number when the phone number could have dots or dashes or parentheses or things like that. There's these things that we're starting, particularly if you go into the world of like data scraping and stuff like that, or even just trying to clean data in a free-form database where people have entered things 18,000 different ways. Finding that data and cleaning it up and things like that, it's really nice to have those utilities where you have a known quantity. You have something that works for maybe X problem, but now that you've maybe tweaked that problem or massaged that problem a little bit more, and you're trying to write that solution, at least you can go with one that's it's 90% there or 80% there. It's like, okay, this works for these cases. So at least I know that's right. So if I'm having to write all new stuff or in a whole different environment, it's like my own little unit test or my own sanity test to say, does this at least cover what this thing does? Am I actually making an improvement? I may be going a little off track there, but the configuration stuff is such a headache. It is such a challenge in so many cases where it's just like, this should be up there and I should be able to spin this up in 5 minutes. In 2 hours, you're still walking through it because you're trying to figure out which file, which letter, or where is there a space, or where did like those little things that it's nice to have something, this works. So you can go verify that. And then you can just do a diff from that and the one that you created, things of that nature. Closing thoughts on that?
Yeah. The only thing I would tack on kind of with our conversation from last time is, as you do this, as you build these kitchen sink apps, these GitHub repositories, the code, portfolios for yourself, if you build these, you're not just going to want to let them sit out there. So once a quarter, once a year, maybe every 6 months, you're going to want to constantly go back out and make sure that it works with the latest versions, because typically, if it's something you put in there, it is a complete piece of code. It's a complete unit of functionality that, as long as you keep it updated, the next time you need it, you just go pull, it's going to work. Boom, you're working. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Like I said, you find something to do encryption or email, put it out there. Next time you need to do email, just go pull it in, kick it off, and you're done. Tweak it, And if you write these well and you write them clean enough, you make them modular, you could even make it to where you just pass in a configuration or some parameters and you're going to get what you want from it. So it's a very compact piece of code. And
that honestly is where you can turn those things. This could eventually become a little moneymaker for you. That was one of the early companies I worked for. We had a bunch of tools that had come out of, we built software, but we also had consultants, and there were tools that the consultants used, and there were tools that we used as part of our development. And we got together at one point and actually turned that into a product in itself that was just a suite of tools that you could use to improve your development experience in that technology on that platform. So there's a lot of ways that this stuff can benefit you, particularly, as Michael said, if you're constantly going back to that thing and reusing it, every time you do it, you may find like a little bug or a way to improve it or something like that. And eventually you have something that maybe has been, you know, trial by fire multiple times. It's really tried and true. It's been proven in a lot of different environments. And now you have something that is, maybe a rock solid little library to either, as itself sell as like a little, add-on somewhere, or maybe it's a piece of, it's a start into a larger, solution or product. Same way, we like to take your emails and those little things that you give us and all that little advice and turn that into bigger things like an episode or maybe even an entire season. So please shoot us an email at info@developreneur.com. Leave us comments here wherever you get your podcast if you're listening to this, or here if you're on YouTube, which you can always go to the YouTube channel, Developreneur. You can see these and so many other things. We've been around for, I think, 5 or 6 years. Maybe it's probably more than that now. We have literally hundreds of, from 15-minute snippets to 30, 60-minute full-on presentations and things like that. It's a lot of information out there that's all in the YouTube world. You can also find it out at developreneur.com. We've got links to all of that kind of stuff, not to mention blog articles and all kinds of other funness. Literally over 1,000 articles out there and links to data, to content, to examples. And you can also go to, if that's too much, you can go to school.developreneur.com and you can find some much more focused classes. Some of them are free, some of them aren't, but some material there to just like maybe get to know some of these things a little bit better and figure out where you want to go next. Maybe get yourself off of your plateau that you have reached. That being said, I want to respect your time, and so wrap this one up. Go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Bonus material.
So the biggest thing I'll add to this, because I find it very useful, and this, again, is a bit of a self-plug for Envision QA, because I'm very QA focused on a lot of things. If you build these kitchen sink apps, if you are building your code repositories, please add unit testing, add integration testing, add stuff to test your code, because 6 months from now, a year from now, you may forget how to use it. And your tests are very good snapshots of, hey, this is how you implement and use the code. The other thing is, if you're using Java or Python or whatever, and you go to a new version and your code breaks, you already have the test. You just need to fix the code. So you save yourself a lot of headache, and it makes it easier for maintainability down the road. So don't forget your testing.
And it is, if you're using it as a some sort of like a portfolio app or something like that, it is really nice to have that kind of stuff. In particular, if you've got pipelines and CI/CD and some of those kinds of things, you've got build scripts and all of those, that it does a build, but it also kicks off tests, or at least some form of the build that can kick off the tests. And there is just something that's very comforting about having code that you haven't touched in 6 months. And the first thing you do is you run your tests and you see that like it ran 400 tests and they were all successful, or if one failed, then you're like, okay, now I got to go figure out, what did I change? What did I break? What configuration file am I missing? Things like that. Those are very helpful, and they are the kinds of things that help us round out our tools and make them helpful in the long run. Bonus stuff, if you weren't here, if you missed the last one, next season, we're going to talk about tips and tricks for how do you personally do things to become a better developer. And we're going to maybe have some challenges or gamify it a little bit and have each episode have something that you can do, an action item to say, all right, this is what I'm going to do for the next, week, month, whatever it happens to be, to work towards becoming a better developer. We would love to hear suggestions and even questions and things like that you guys have, feedback on that. Or if you have future seasons that you would love for us to tackle, shoot us an email at info@developreneur.com, as we've always mentioned. And other than that, we're going to wrap this one up. We've gone a little bit long. So come back here. Before you know it, we'll be hitting record again. We'll have the next episode, and we'll just be continuing on, getting closer and closer to the end of our developer journey. Going to land this plane fairly soon and then move on to the next season. Have a great one, and we will talk to you guys next time.